Nana, my great-grandmother, has been gone now for well over 30 years, but I can still hear her voice as clearly as you hear mine, calling out to me, "Lillian, no matter where you go in this world, never forget who you are, and always remember our ancestors, those bridges that have brought us safely across. I stand before you, woven from the fiber of my Nana's wisdom, a proud Gullah Geechee woman, reared on the dirt streets of Carver Village on the west side and the rocky streets of a close-knit neighborhood on the east side, simply called East Savannah. The Gullah Geechee people that I hail from are descendants of Africans who were kidnapped from West and Central Africa and enslaved and brought to the coastal areas of Georgia and South Carolina to work the rice, cotton, and indigo fields. This culture was birthed from a creolization of West and Central African cultures, and according to the Gullah Geechee website, has been able to retain more African traditions and customs than any other group of African Americans. It is interesting to me that my Nana would refer to our ancestors and use that as a bridge, as a metaphor to describe our ancestors. Bridges provide a safe passage over dangerous waters and other obstacles. Bridges also connect us to an intended destination. And my ancestors were human bridges that helped our people to pass over the tumultuous waters of assimilation and self-disregard. And interestingly enough, and ironically, the steel bridges that were open and provided access to external world to come in, and sometimes land developers and other outsiders to come into our communities and infiltrate, disconnect, and fragment many of our people from their traditions. And it set the course for cultural convergence. And for the Gullah Geechee people, cultural convergence was a double-edged sword. In many ways, it opened up our people to different ideas and a totally different way of life, but it also ushered in forces that diluted our culture. And as our people left those secluded communities and took hold of the mainstream culture, they often relinquished their own. So little girls no longer had an interest in learning how to make the beautiful sweetgrass baskets. And young men could care less about crafting the fish nets and the shrimp nets that once fed and sustained us. And the beautiful Gullah Geechee language that was once a vessel of survival that carried the stories and the secrets of a stolen people began to be shunned and labeled as ignorant. And according to an article that was published in 2021 by Walt Wolfram, only 300 people fluently speak the Gullah Geechee language. The Gullah Geechee people face today a barrage of different battles on many fronts, to include the continued threat of land developers that have opened the door for many of our traditional neighborhoods to be gentrified. They face other issues as well: food insecurity and food apartheid, mass incarceration, health disparities and health inequities, and many other systemic forces. But I believe that the shackles of these forces can be broken when we become a bridge that gaps hope to hope and hopelessness to hope. I have been charged as a ritual celebrant and a master storyteller by my ancestors to be a keeper of our culture and a guardian of our story. So I would like to share with you a story that was passed down from my ancestors, a story of the flying Africans. They tell me, lean in and listen, they tell me that back in our homeland in Africa, that our people knew how to fly. But then slavery came to our land, and our people forgot who they were, and they could no longer fly. But there were certain Africans that looked just like everyone else that was brought to the Gullah Geechee communities, who remembered who they were and the beauty of flight. And there was one who lived and worked on a rice plantation not too far from where we are. An elder by the name of Jeremiah. He and his daughter worked and lived on this plantation. This particular day, as they worked, they said it was hot, unbearably so. And Sarah, his daughter, had just given birth to a baby, so her body was weak and frail. But as she worked, Sarah became tired and worn, and she fell to the ground. And no sooner than she had fallen, the one that they called the overseer was on her like white on rice and whipped her unmercifully until she fell, bloodied and broken to the ground. And as the overseer walked away, Jeremiah walked out of the shadows, and he stood over his daughter, and he whispered, and he said to her, "It's time now to do as you know how to do. It's time to fly." And he whispered these deep, dark, black African words, and something within Sarah began to stir. And she put one foot in front of the other, and she lifted up, and she began to fly. And she flew over that old rice field and weeping and wailing, and she flew home to freedom. Though sooner than she'd flown away, another young boy fell to the ground, and Jeremiah was right there and lifted him up and held him in his arms and whispered those same deep, dark, black African words. And that young brother, something in him shifted, and he flipped over and rode the wind like a horse. And he flew over that rice field, weary days and warm nights, and he flew home to freedom. Then Jeremiah stood in the middle of that rice field with his arms outstretched. And he cried out those deep, dark, black African words. And all over that field, those Africans began to lift up their backs as if they were bridges. And they began to fly. And they flew over that old rice field and the indigo fields and the cotton fields, weary days and warm nights. And they shifted east and flew over our passage here. And they soared over the bones of our ancestors that rest on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. And they continued to fly until they flew home to freedom. And I believe that one day we will wake up with those words bubbling within the collective psyche and memory of who we are as a people. We will straighten up our bridges, our backs like bridges. And we will remember who we are, that we are descendants of a people who have been beaten but never broken, cast down but not destroyed, shaken but never shattered. We will remember who we are, a people who took nothing and made something. And we will lift up and we will fly again. We will fly again. We will be bridges of hope, and we will fly again. I invite you to join me as a bridge. A bridge that stands against the currents of injustices and inequity. A bridge of inclusion that will connect the most marginalized voices to the heart of our community conversation. A bridge that will stand and boldly and unapologetically speak truth to power. Why don't we all resolve to be bridges, pathways that connect that which has been disconnected, pathways to hope, pathways to healing and reconciliation. Be a bridge.